when we were working together, there was just Gen X and Millennials. You guys were Gen X, right? But right now, in large enterprises and even in small, medium businesses, there are boomers, there are Gen X, there are Millennials, there are Gen Zs. What are the observations and generational divide amongst the young folks and the really not so young folks?
Well, last I checked, I think I made it to the millennials cutoff, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, yeah. We were Millennials.
Welcome back to our practical leadership series here in Lumpia Bytes. And I'm very, very excited for this episode today. As always, our goal here in Lumpia Bytes is to help you learn about AI and leadership through real conversations with people who actually do the work. And today's episode is truly special because we're joined by someone who's been there, done that, and still doing it from both a technical and leadership standpoint. He also happens to be one of our very first team leaders and managers when Muchi and I started our career. So it's really a full circle moment for us today. And, we're very humbled to have him as our very first guest in our podcast. So Much, why don't you tell a little bit about our guest today?
Sure, G. He is currently a senior director in one of the biggest, if not the biggest telcos in the Philippines. Over the years, he's taken on multiple leadership roles from manager, practice leader, VP and head of data analytics to chief technologist and lead data scientist. He's been in the data and analytics space for as long as I know, before it was even the talk of the town. He's led teams through digital and data transformation long before AI became a mainstream buzzword. And today, we'll get to hear how his journey led him to becoming a data and AI leader. But most of all, I'm proud to call him my first ever corporate boss, my first slave driver, and one of the funniest, most awesome bosses I could have ever asked for, alongside with his co-manager that gave me and the team and G the funnest first team, first job experience ever.
Wow. So this is someone who's seen tech evolve from databases all the way now to AI and led people through every step of that journey. So let's dive right in. Welcome our very first guest, Terence Gocheco. Sir, how are you?
Gee, hello, Muchi. Wow,
Hello.
you guys are too kind. Well, it's really such an honor to, as you said, be one of the first guests in your podcast. And I'm very excited to talk to you guys about leadership and AI. So yeah, I've been good, busy, still in the corporate world, still being a slave driver, as Muchi just said. But yeah,
It's very fitting because this podcast is really all about leadership, AI, and the tech world. So, I know we're going to learn a lot about, your journey. So I guess let's dive into it, right? So you graduated mechanical engineering, topping the board exam, magna cum laude, and then you pivoted to IT. What made you decide to go to IT?
all right. Um, I guess the answer to that question, it's really more opportunistic and very practical more than anything. So at that time, IT was a very promising field. Hence, there are a lot more job opportunities, and that's where a lot more of the um, how do you say it's better career opportunities are towards the IT industry. There are definitely some engineering jobs here and there. And during my OJT and while I was looking for opportunities, I did find some engineering opportunities as well. But they were not as promising career wise as the ones that opened up for IT. So that's where I opted to go for.
Yeah, I remember those days. When we graduated, a lot of engineering students went to IT, right? Because I think the pay difference is there's a gap in there, so a lot of people is going to information technology. What challenges did you face when you moved to IT, right? From a mechanical engineering background, you started your career in IT. Were there any sort of like difference or challenges that you faced when you started your career in IT?
I think there were two things. One is that I, when I started, I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision. So yeah, the pay was better, etc. But in the first couple of months, I would just stare out the window and wonder if I had made the right decisions. So I couldn't really fully commit to an IT career. I was thinking, I could be out in an oil field somewhere and doing the fun stuff. Of course, I had a certain pride knowing that I graduated engineering. So I also wanted to be there, right? So I couldn't really commit fully, and that probably held me back a bit. The second was that in my mind, I was working with other people, in a way, competing with other people in the office, and they had the training for an IT career. They knew more coding languages. They studied how to be an IT professional for 4 years in college, and I didn't have that. So psychologically, it felt like I was behind, which really pushed me to want to learn more and try to figure out or get some additional training just to complement whatever skills I had. Just because, again, in my mind, I was behind and I didn't know a lot compared to them.
Yeah. There's two things there, right? So one is hindi mo makalimutan yung engineering. Right? How did you overcome that? Because I guess this is a very, I mean, I just learned it from you today, and I experienced the same thing. So I graduated in engineering, went to IT. There was some point after a few years in IT, I was interviewing for an engineering company, and I was really thinking of moving back. But it was a struggle for me. But how did you overcome that? How did you forget IT, your engineering, the love for engineering?
So I think it was maybe a couple of years into the job. Um, I Of course, one of my advice to people is to always be open to outside opportunities, right? Even as you're happy and you're being, if you're happy with your work, you're happy with your career, you still have to be open to look for other jobs. So at that point in time, I tried reaching out, applied for jobs. So the company that I worked in during my OJT actually processed my application, and I went through the whole job application cycle. So it was for an engineering job. Um, in the end, I got a job offer. It was a very compelling job offer. So imagine I've worked in IT at that point for a couple of years. I've had zero engineering experience, and they offered me a very competitive package. So it was a challenging decision, I would say. Took me some time to decide. In the end, I said, you know what? Where I was back then, I was taken care of. I grew. I learned a lot, and my progress was so good that I think it's time to let go. And I know that I'm in the right spot wherever I was at that point in time. So it took me an opportunity and a choice like that, a decision like that, for me to say, okay, it's time to move on. I'll just focus here. Goodbye, engineering world.
Yeah. Wow. That was not easy, I guess. But how about the second one? How did you overcome that? That your peers there, they know programming. Paano ka nakasabay, di ba?
So, I jumping into IT was not. I didn't blindly jump into IT. So, I had some basic knowledge of some programming languages then, like SQL, for example. So, even as I don't know your Javas or your .NETs, I know SQL. So that's where I focus more on. So it's not really about trying to learn everything just to match up with others, but to use what you have and to maximize what you know and apply those. And that's what I did. I backed it up with what I learned from the engineering side of things, which is um, how to solve problems, right? Tackling each challenge one at a time, piecing together, figuring out the root cause by breaking a complex problem down into simple, manageable pieces and applying problem solving to that. It took me a lot of resilience. Um, so, with our engineering backgrounds, you have again, it's very complex, and you really need to have resilience to be able to piece together those things. It's really maximizing and applying your strengths towards the job, and that's what I did.
Wow. So basically, your degree doesn't really define your future, right? It's how you behave as you progress to your on your career, whether it's the original career that you planned for, or it's a new one.
Yeah, and I think in this day and age, it's really very typical to to see that, right? So the degree is what we chose early on as we were our younger selves, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's your final path towards your entire career.
So I guess to college graduates watching us, right, who wants to be a leader in the future or wants to be in IT, AI, data, right? It doesn't really matter what your background is, as long as you have that enthusiasm, yes, on the industry, right? When you have that resilience, like what you said, you can make it.
That is
Cool.
true.
So, how did you start your leadership journey? So now you're in IT, you're in data. How did you start your leadership journey? I'm curious, would you describe yourself as an accidental leader, or leadership is something that you've always aimed for when you started in corporate?
It's kind of strange. So when I was young, I kind of felt that I had a tendency to lead. Meaning, like when you're in school and you feel like you're a leader amongst your peers or your barcadas or what. So there was that sense that I knew I could lead, but at the same time, when entering the corporate world, or actually even just working with groups, for example, in college, I wasn't the type of person who would proactively or consciously think, I want to lead, I want to be the leader in this team. I'm
Hindi
more
ka
of
Bibo kid.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I actually don't like it. I'm the one who would not want to recite in class, or who would not want to proactively volunteer for things. That's not who I am, right? But I knew I am if I need to lead, I could step up and do it, but only when I felt like doing it. So in this case, yeah, I did really force myself into leadership, but trying to figure out, I mean, it's doing my best in whatever task, whatever project I was at, or if it's working within a team, then figuring out what I needed to be, who I needed to be, and what I needed to do to be able for everyone to be successful. And if it required me to already take over, to lead, or leadership isn't just about you being assigned as the leader, right? Sometimes it's about mi- having that courage to speak up, to make suggestions, to come up with, or to take the reins, might be one, right? So there are different forms and ways to be able to lead a project, to be able to lead a team. Sometimes it's not being assigned as the leader. And I guess
I,
that's where I started.
I like that, kasi parang when you started, if you're focused too much on climbing up the ladder, the leadership, you feel like it's not coming to you. But your strategy is just do your best in every task, every role that you're gonna get into at the start, and it will come, right?
I just want to call it a strategy. So for me, it comes naturally. So parang
That's right.
I, I, I probably don't have the ambition to be a big leader of a big group. It's what I can say.
Mhm.
So if I need to be, it will happen. There were some times where I was already a leader, but it felt uncomfortable because I'm also I'm an introvert, so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable working with a lot of people, and you guys know that. I'm not comfortable talking in front of a crowd, etc. So it's not something intentional for me or I don't plot or strategize to you know you know to
Right.
go up. If it happens, it happens, and yeah, why not?
Yeah. And there's it's humility as well, I mean, like we've known you from the very start of our career, and we know that you're really not the one who's going to be booked, but you have your ways to do it very smooth and slowly but surely. So, and also it's your humility. So, who is there anyone who influenced you? If you're gonna look back, was there any person, or maybe if it's not a person, right? Maybe someone that you're following, that really influenced you or taught you a lot in how as you as a leader today? You
It's
don't have to
not.
name the person, but if there is, like if we know him.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. That there are different leaders that you would encounter in the course of your career, and different leaders would influence you and shape you in different ways, whether they're a good leader or not. So I've encountered a lot of leaders throughout my career. Some are on the strict side, some are very straight to the point, some are inspirational and charismatic leaders. There are leaders who empower others, while there are leaders who tend to just push and bully people around and delegate and stuff. Um, but I guess what's important is, you have to look at that collective experience, and um, for sure, each and every one of them, no matter how long or short a time you've been working with them, you would pick up on a lot of things, good and bad. For the good things that you observe, for those that would inspire you, then you would try to emulate, or you try to figure out, how can I be that person who is so charismatic, who a lot of people love? What is it about that person? What are his characteristics? And how do I copy that one? Because I want to be that kind of a leader. Similar also to those who can empower and really shape the culture of a team. So, what are the techniques that leader has? Um, so overall, I think the key to leadership, as I've seen throughout my career, it's really all about growth mindset, right? So it's being open to, or being very honest about yourself, that as a leader, there is always room to grow and learn on how to be a good leader. So try to absorb all of those things proactively within yourself, figuring out, trying to learn, and trying to test out things that good leaders do. So, because if you don't practice it, you won't be able to really lead and
Mm-hmm.
learn it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so one will be learning from the leader and seeing what works. What I've also found is that, and I've learned this from some of my earlier leaders, that learning from other people and learning from experience from leaders is one thing, but being able to learn outside of the experiential setup is another. So there are lots of leadership tools out there. So, for us, we've been sent by our HRs to different leadership things, etc. And even now, I actually am enrolled in a leadership course, which I totally don't like. But yeah, but in the end, I still end up learning things even till now about my own leadership style, my own tendencies. But looking back, I would also look at those tools, and within the tools and those trainings and the podcasts about leadership that I watched, I was able to pick up a lot of good things as well in terms of leadership. And it's really a mix of you trying out stuff and tools that you learn from outside sources, and you try to bring it all in together to form whatever your leadership style would be.
So it's more of the really applying it, not just learning the theories from different. And also, one more thing I pick up there is, which is a good one, that you kind of define your own self, your own leadership style from all the people that you've met. So there's not one people who's going to define your leadership's, who's going to influence your leadership skills, but it's a collective, different kind of people that you're going to meet along the way, whether it's good or bad. It's going to shape who you are. So you define your own, right, along the way, which is really good. You're not just copying someone, because if it's not yourself, don't do that, right? So you still have to define it.
Yeah.
Cool. How about any kind of silly mistakes that you did as a leader way back? That when you look back right now, you still cringe and kind of, oh, why did I do that? Like some rookie leader mistakes.
So one one thing that has brought me a lot of stress during that point in time was is trying to appease everyone or making everyone in the team happy, right? So like nitpicking, like you know those surveys that HR does, voice of the workforce, and trying to see if everyone in your team is happy, what their process is. I remember that for those where our team had low scores, it would stress me out so much that I would find ways to identify each and every little flaw, and in the end, it would actually bring drain me, right? Um, expecting that the team can be made to be perfect and that there are zero flaws is actually a mistake. And I learned it eventually that, it can't really appease everyone. You can try to adjust and be a different leader for different people. And I think that's okay. That's part of leadership to know how to deal and manage with different people. But at the end of the day, you can only do so much, and you just have to let go and trust that you've done your part, and you have to have that um, confidence that you've done the best you could. Hopefully, it was enough, and you were enough
Yeah.
for it.
You can't make everyone happy,
Yeah.
basically, especially if you're working with a big group, a lot of people. I mean, they all have their own self-interest and things. So we just have to find that common ground where some will compromise, some will not. So that's a
Yeah.
good one. Much, do you have any question? I know you have a
My
lot. I
turn.
see you typing.
I mean, like taking notes from Terence. It's not every day you get to ask your first boss a lot of questions. It's like, oh, the guy who interviewed me. Now I get to ask questions. Evil laugh. But Terence, just to get into the specifics, one of the hot topics right now is Gen Zs in the workplace. And one thing I remembered from our team in iZoom years ago, I don't know how many years ago, but I don't want to count anymore. And one thing I remember was that there were a lot of 20 something year old. I was 20-year-old when I entered the workforce. They say that the human brain only fully forms at 25. So I only realized that now that I'm 35. So that actually meant that you and Brian were managing humans with barely fully formed human brains and maturity. But you guys did it so well. And now that I'm older and I'm leading teams and people, it's so difficult. Like, it's so difficult. So I wanted to ask, like, how did you guys do it? How did you guys manage that team of hooligans, that team of chaos, with people with barely fully formed, mature instincts? Yeah, we were in our early 20s, just entering our 20s and mid 20s. How did you guys manage that mess of unfully formed human brains?
if you ask me, I probably cannot differentiate the Gen X, the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, Alphas, whatever. I wouldn't even know the cutoff years and the characteristics of them. Um, so it's not so much about the age or what generation they come from, but as a leader and with all the collective knowledge that you have, there are best practices and ways in terms of being able to guide new members and how you can shape them to be good leaders. So even till now, I work with 20+ year old people, professionals, and it's still the same approach in terms of being able to provide feedback, guiding and providing guiding and coaching, being very factual about where they are, how they perform, and what they could do to be able to improve on how they work. And even till now, I still meet a lot of brilliant 20+ year old professionals who continue to amaze and inspire me. Um, so yeah, it really goes back to y- you as a leader and being able to have that commitment and hopefully have the right tool set to be able to guide all of them and shape them to become good professionals and great leaders.
So basically, you didn't see like gap between the younger generation now to the younger generation that you've managed before, right? Because it's been a common issues, especially in the U.S. as well, right? The Gen Zs that they lack interpersonal skills, the the human skills or the soft skills, whatever you call it, but because they're digital native, then they kind of push for the work life balance on an extreme point where they take leave because of the mental health issues and they want to take care of their mental health, so they want this, the strong push on work life balance, right? And also like purpose over profit, right? So they're always into the ethics on the sustainability and all those stuff. So I'm just wondering, so right now there's you don't see that gap in at least in your team or in your or the previous teams that you've handled.
And we've had side conversations, of course, with my fellow colleagues about these observations. But in terms of actually leading them already, you try to move away um, from profiling them that way, I would say, but really just focus on the behaviors and where you want them to be. Of course, there will be some adjustments. There will be a lot of trying to understand where they are, where they're coming from. You made a very important point about right now we have to be very conscious about mental health, for example. And um, now more than ever, I've experienced more people citing mental health as a challenge or being able to. But in the end, it goes back to try to understand where they are and trying to figure out what can we do to be able to help them and guide them towards where we think they should be and what their potential is. So,
Wow.
not so much on the profiling side, but more on understanding. And yeah, you are right. It would take a lot more of us to fully understand where they're coming from now. But if you go down to the root of it, there will be some drivers as to why they feel a certain way. And mental health might be a term that is used commonly now. It's great. I'm sure during our time, there is a version of that we felt. We might have called it stress or something, but it will have probably translated to mental health challenges for us as well at that point in time.
That kind of leadership style, do you realize that it's abnormal? It's abnormal because you talk like a coach and a mentor Whereas in other systems, in other management styles, there's a palakasan system, there is an egocentric system. I think the reason why you talk like that actually is that you've managed to, we respect you a lot. Like having reported under you, we respected you a lot because you were factual, because you were like a coach, you were trying to function as both a coach, a mentor, a leader, and a boss at the same time. You've managed to stay relatively ego free for as long as I've known you. So I wanted to understand, how is that an active decision on your part? And how did you manage to maintain that all through these years? Is that something because you're an engineer, it's more factual and mathematical in your brain?
Wow, you're too kind, Muchi. And thank you for that question. I like the question because it's something, my answer would be something that I feel strongly about. So, yes, it is a conscious decision on my part to act in a certain way. My preference is to be as approachable as possible with the rest of my team. And my translation or how I would implement that is to try to break all of these barriers of leader versus employee. I won't be the serious leader who tries to uphold a very high standard across each and every one. I would try to be more on the loose, non-strict side of things. Um, but still trying to have those boundaries that we can all be friends toward the common goal. Yeah. So yeah, it's a conscious decision on my part, and
Wow. Okay. Nice.
That's really good, Much. Kasi parang this what one thing I pick up there is don't profile them, right? Sometimes if you think, oh, Gen Z, I mean,
Yeah.
like there's already a bias, right? So
Yeah.
that's one thing I think it's very important. And second one is to be approachable because you're not gonna understand them if your doors are closed, right? So you have to have this really open communication. Still, there's boundaries definitely.
But Terence, what's funny is that you say that you don't have a high standard, but you have a very, very high standard. but you clothe it, but you clothe it with humor. That's the thing. Like you have a high standard. You try to be approachable, you try to be friendly, you are so casual about certain things, but you are a magna cum laude graduate. You are very smart, and it's kind of, if you're not smart, it's very hard to keep up with you because your brain is always working. So I guess my question there is that how do you do that balance that you have this, you pretend that you don't have a high standard for your team, but you actually have a high standard for your team, but your team doesn't feel it because you make it fun. So I'm like wondering, how do you do that? Like how does that magic happen?
it's not something intentional, would say. But the term that comes to mind, and it's a very common term nowadays, safe space. Being able to provide that safe space for our team is very critical for to have a sort of like a culture that what we had in ISO before, right? Where everyone can just contribute, everyone feels empowered, and everyone is comfortable working with each other, providing feedback, all of that. We didn't have the term safe space then, but
Mhm.
nowadays that's what I hear that resonates most with what we had then. And I guess for me, it's kind of natural to make everything fun. So one of the leaders I've watched in HP days, he was never my manager, but I when I see him, he always makes these jokes from out of the blue in the most serious situations and meetings, and I'm like, yeah, why not, right? So so yeah, so now I'm known for a lot of daddy jokes in the office, unfortunately. but I think it comes natural that um, I want working to be not super serious. It has to be funny. Um, Making it fun is part of setting up that safe space, which also sets up the kind of working environment and culture that I would want to have to be in terms of a team, and I would want my team also to enjoy it as well.
What I'm actually getting from you, Terence, is that safe space or psychological safety. Like it's a huge buzzword nowadays in leadership, like psychological safety, mental health, and all of that. We didn't have those words before, but now it's like finally there's a term for it. That's psychological safety. What I'm getting from you is that actually allows people to unlock their genius by giving them that safe space, that psychological safety to fail, to admit their mistakes, to try, to, to do something they're proud of without the ego, either the ego boost or that ego hurt, that ego pain when they fail. So that I think that's the safe what the safety brings, no? It allows for people to unlock their genius. Whether they fail or succeed, they still have that safe space with you, with leaders like you, right? That's what I'm getting.
Yes, and I love it, Muchi, that you articulate it so well. It's like you're reading what I wanted to say and put it into the correct words. I would just like to put one last term there, which is empowerment. So being able to unlock that genius in the rest of our teams, I think that's empowerment. And that comes from us putting them in the right working environment with psychological safety, for them to feel empowered and to bring for us to bring out basically the best in them.
A safe space. I mean, I know it's the first time I heard about that, but is this more like a corporate from the top? Like it's a culture that you guys wanted to, or it's more very specifically there, or it's more of like coming from a corporate kind of vocabulary that we want to promote this more like a corporate value thing.
I think it's something that comes out in somewhere out there, some of
Hmm.
those industry terms.
Cool.
But definitely, if it comes from the top, it will likely not get followed. And people will just probably mock it if you spell it out that, okay, all of us will have psychological safety as of today, you know. So it goes back from the bottom up for us as people who work with teams to make sure that that happens and for us to figure out how do we create this proper environment for our folks.
Yeah.
I think it becomes more powerful that way.
Yeah. No, the reason why I asked because, if it came from the top, I think this is good because the top is acknowledging that there's a new generation of workforce coming in, right? So there's always this big gap between Gen Z and Gen X or boomers or millennials. But I think for me, Gen Z's problem like right now are actually because of the environment that was created by millennials and Gen X, right? So we gave them all these digital tools, make them digital native. Now they lack this interpersonal skills. They've grown up seeing their parents like working so hard, hustle culture, right? And now they don't want to follow that lifestyle because they've seen their parents like, what's this, right? We don't even have time for them. So now they grow up. I want real work life balance. So I feel like it's also the fault of the older generation. So, and I think to embrace them right now because we don't have a choice, right? They're gonna lead. I think from the statistics, 25% of the workforce globally right now are Gen Zs, and it's going to increase year by year. So I think as it increases, the tension is going to be stronger. But I feel like it's a two-way street. The corporate from the top, they have to adjust on what Gen Z wants or the values that matters to them. And also Gen Z, it's not always about, oh, we need to train them, coach them because they will not change, right? Some of them will not change. They have their own thing. So they can be coached at some point, but they have to live with the same values that they have. So looking at the values that they're promoting, to be honest, it's good, right? The purpose over profit, the work-life balance, and these are really good values, but they're challenging the norms. So I think could be a good thing, but now it's a struggle for the leaders and managing them. It's a struggle right now, but I feel like both needs to have the compromise. And but I really like that if it's coming from the top, that safe space, at least they're adjusting, they're learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right that the leaders need to adapt and understand, how is the culture shaping up to be in this day and age. So especially as we look into, the advent of Gen AI and um, things like vibe coding now, where you have developers that are reliant on these tools to be able to build things. For the leaders who are leading this group, there needs to be a better understanding of how to tap into their potentials. And adjustments are inevitable for sure. But we also have to adjust as leaders to be able to tap, because the next generation, they will surely be better than us. And we have to find ways to be able to tap on their potential.
Cool.
Yeah. I think that's a superpower. I think that's a leader superpower because like leaders or yeah, managers who are ranting about a certain generation, I don't think they're gonna like last long because they have no choice. Because this is the workforce. The young folks are the workforce that are going to dominate the workforce eventually. That's how life works. Terence, one last two questions. I know you don't want to judge and profile generations, but when we were working together, there was just Gen X and Millennials. You guys were Gen X, right? And we were the Millennials entering the workforce. I, I'm in marketing now, so I know the generations. Mostly, it was just Gen X and Millennials before in that tech, tech work tech workforce in HP. But right now, in large enterprises and even in small medium businesses, there are boomers, there are Gen X, there are millennials, there are Gen Zs. There is definitely like a four generational family happening in enterprises and businesses today. What's the drama that you're seeing, Terence? What are the observations and generational divide amongst the amongst the young folks and the really not so young folks? Are you observing any, and how do you spot it, see it, and how do you handle it?
Um, well, last I checked, I think I made it to the millennials cutoff, but not 100% sure.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah. We were millennials.
Yeah. Um, I maybe I'm not as exposed. I mean, it really goes down to some, conversations here and there about, how challenging it is working with the new generations. There's a difference in culture. For me personally, it's really more of the language, I would say. And, new terms come in. I'm not as in touch with the lingo of the younger ones. That's for sure. And of course, all of that chatter about sometimes it's easier for them to quit. There are more reasons, excuses to quit, things like that. But again, you have to put yourself into trying to judge fairly versus trying to profile them. I guess that's my approach to the thing.
So I'm gonna ask you to do three versions of advice here, Terence. Okay. To the boomers who are listening here, to the boomer C-suite who's listening to this podcast right now, having a difficulty managing young talent and Gen Zs, what do you advise them to do? Like, what three steps can they do to leverage and make Gen Z shine better for their own businesses and enterprises?
I think there needs to be that recognition that, leadership must evolve, and it must evolve based on, what the circumstances are at that time. If not, then for sure your leadership style will get outdated. I've seen leaders who tend to stay on the traditional side of things and do the things that work for them for their whole careers. And honestly, even now in Globe, I see that there are certain leaders who are like that, and it really doesn't work. It has led to challenges here and there. You end up with a traditional waterfall way of doing things, which can be very slow in the day and age. So my advice is to um, recognize that the changes have happened. The workforce is different now, and you have to try and keep up to learn about who you're working with, how the younger generation is, what values have changed, and try to acknowledge and adapt to that, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
The second one is to the Gen Zs, to the 20 something years old, who is listening and having a difficulty in working with or dealing with their boomer leaders that they don't want to listen to or feel that they don't understand them. But what do you advise the Gen Zs in terms of like how do you deal with somebody 10, 20 years older than you and's managing you and leading you?
My normal advice would always be to provide feedback and really try and push the boundaries in terms of making the others understand. But that's my normal advice. But sometimes when you're talking to certain leaders, you also have to acknowledge that there are limits to the amount of change that you would expect from some of the leaders. So I guess there also needs to be a level of patience and understanding that, it's 20, 30 years or even more of them being that kind of a leader and doing things that way. Maybe there are ways to try to open their minds towards new approaches, but maybe also try to be patient with them as they themselves go through this journey.
Nice. What I'm getting there is that patience is a skill, courage is a skill, and resilience is a skill. So, Gen Zs, these would be the things that would be nice to develop apart from the technical skills. And last but not least, to the millennials who have been probably in the workforce for 10, 15 years, entering their first leadership roles, tr- being able to manage people for the first time in their careers as bosses, as leaders, as managers, what what do you advise them to do? Because they're in this awkward position that they're reporting to somebody higher, but and at the same time managing a mixed generation bag, right? What do you advise them to do? How should they lead in this time?
Well, first off, they should enjoy the whole process. So it's a very exciting time for them. I will go back to growth mindsets and consciously knowing that you have to grow and evolve as a leader. So I've been mentoring some younger ones recently, and they're exactly at that point in time where it's their first time to lead and manage a team. It's very, you see the excitement, but you also see the confusion and a lot of questions in their mind in terms of how to be a leader. But what inspires me about them is that they have that energy. They are taking that conscious effort to be a good leader. And that's what's important. If you are trying to be a good leader, it means you are learning, you are trying out things, you are trying to figure out what your team needs, regardless if they're a lot younger or if they're at the same age as you. And they're finding ways to lead effectively, getting advice from other people, listening and trying to understand where the team is coming from. In the end, it's all about, again, growth mindset, and being open to learn, being open to become a good leader.
So that seems to be the formula. Stay humble, stay curious, stay authentic, with a growth mindset as your anchor with all of this. Because I guess the growth mindset, the prerequisite of that is accepting that it's a growing pain. It's like it's a painful journey because you are growing and you are evolving, and evolution is a very painful journey. So I guess that resilience in that process would be a requirement to that. Okay, so now you guys know, to the millennials and the new middle managers listening to this one. Back to you, G.
No, really good insight. So to everyone watching, right, if you have any advice as well, all right, to Gen Zs entering the workforce, working with their leaders, and also current leaders managing Gen Zs, right? So feel free to comment in the link below. So Terence, thank you so much. I know you're gonna be back for another episode. So to everyone watching, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay tuned on the next episode where we're gonna talk about how he led different teams, multiple teams into transformation, and what do we really need to know about AI today. So stay tuned.